when I discovered $34,000 in unauthorized wedding charges on the credit card I'd given my daughter for emergencies only, I didn't just cancel the card. When I found out my son had been using my address to secure fraudulent business loans while living rent-free in my house, I didn't just ask him to leave. What I did was so systematic, so devastating, that it not only saved me from financial ruin, but helped break up an entire senior exploitation ring. My own children thought they could drain me dry while treating me like I was invisible. They learned the hard way that this 61-year-old former pediatric nurse wasn't going down without a fight. I'm Martha Reynolds from Flagstaff, Arizona, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my life, my money, and my self-respect from the two people who should have protected them. But before I tell you how I dismantled their schemes piece by piece, smash that like button if you believe parents deserve better than financial abuse. Subscribe for more incredible stories of justice served, and comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Let me start by telling you who I was before everything fell apart, because understanding that will help you understand how I was able to fight back so effectively. My name is Martha Reynolds, and for 32 years, I worked as a pediatric nurse at Flagstaff Medical Center. I specialized in emergency pediatric care, which meant I was used to making quick decisions under pressure, coordinating complex care plans, and advocating fiercely for vulnerable patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. I learned early in my career that sometimes the biggest threat to a child's well-being wasn't their medical condition. It was the adults who were supposed to protect them. Parents who neglected medical needs, family members who enabled dangerous situations, caregivers who put their own convenience above a child's safety. I became very good at spotting those patterns and intervening before they caused lasting damage. I married my husband, Henry, when I was 23, right after nursing school. He was an electrician with the most generous heart I'd ever encountered. We had 2 children, Chloe, who's now 32, and Brandon, who's 28. Henry and I raised them in a modest but comfortable bungalow in Flagstaff, teaching them the value of hard work, the importance of family, and the belief that we should always help each other when times get tough. Henry passed away from cancer 3 years ago, leaving me his life insurance policy and a decent pension from his union work. Combined with my own nursing pension, I had enough to maintain my independence and enjoy my retirement. I had plans to travel, volunteer at free clinics, maybe even adopt a senior dog from the local rescue. What I didn't plan for was discovering that the children I'd raised to value family and hard work had learned entirely different lessons from our generosity. Chloe moved to Phoenix after college and worked in marketing for various companies. She was always between jobs, always having relationship drama, always needing temporary help with rent or car payments or some other emergency. Henry and I helped because that's what parents do. We gave her the down payment for her apartment, co-signed her car loan, and probably sent her $500 to $1,000 most months to help with expenses. Brandon never really left home. After high school, he attended community college for a while, then dropped out to start various business ventures that never seemed to materialize into actual income. He lived in my basement, drove my second car, ate my food, and contributed absolutely nothing to household expenses. Henry and I justified it by telling ourselves he was still figuring things out, that he just needed time and support to find his path. After Henry died, both kids promised they'd be there for me. They'd help around the house, check in regularly, make sure I wasn't lonely. For a few months, they actually followed through. Chloe called more, Brandon helped with yard work and repairs, but gradually the support faded while the requests for help continued to increase. Chloe's calls became less about checking on me and more about her latest crisis. Brandon's help around the house disappeared, but his use of my car, my food, and my utilities continued unchanged. The breaking point came when Chloe got engaged to Aaron, a man I'd met exactly twice before she announced their wedding plans. I was excited for her. Finally, some stability and happiness in her life. I offered to help with wedding costs within reason, and I gave her a credit card linked to my account for genuine emergencies. The emergency-only part of that arrangement turned out to be the biggest mistake I'd made since Henry died. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the moment I realized my children saw me not as their mother, but as their personal ATM. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in March when I called Chloe to ask about the engagement dinner she'd mentioned the week before. "Hi, honey. I just wanted to confirm what time the engagement dinner is this weekend. Should I drive down Friday night or Saturday morning?" There was a pause on the other end of the line that lasted just a beat too long.
"Oh," Chloe said, her voice oddly flat. "We had it yesterday." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Yesterday? But you said it was this weekend." "I know, Mom, but Aaron's parents could only do Sunday, and we didn't want to change it again." "Chloe, why didn't you call me? I could have driven down Sunday morning." Another pause. "It was really last minute, Mom. And honestly, it was mostly Aaron's family and some work friends. It wasn't really, it wasn't a big family thing." I sat in my kitchen, holding the phone, trying to process what she was telling me. My only daughter had gotten engaged and had an engagement dinner, and she deliberately excluded me. "Sweetie, I don't understand. I'm your mother. Why wouldn't you want me there?" "Mom, please don't make this into a big drama. It was just dinner. We'll do something together soon, okay?" But we didn't do something together soon. Weeks passed, and every time I suggested getting together to celebrate her engagement or talk about wedding plans, Chloe was busy. She'd text me photos from restaurants with Aaron or share Instagram posts from parties with friends, but somehow there was never time for her mother. The second sign came when I saw photos on Facebook of my grandson Tyler's spring recital. My daughter-in-law had posted pictures of the whole family, including Brandon, who apparently had driven down to Phoenix for the event without mentioning it to me. I called Brandon that night. "I saw the pictures from Tyler's recital. It looked wonderful." "Oh yeah, it was cute. Kid's got some talent. I wish I'd known about it. I would have loved to come." Brandon's tone was casual, almost dismissive. "It was just a school thing, Mom. Nothing fancy. Besides, you don't really like driving to Phoenix." I did drive to Phoenix. I'd driven there dozens of times to help Chloe with moves, to babysit Tyler when she needed it, to attend birthday parties and holidays. The suggestion that I wouldn't want to come to my grandson's recital hurt more than I expected. "Brandon, you know I would have loved to see Tyler perform." "Yeah, well, it wasn't really planned in advance or anything." But the Facebook photo showed a whole family gathering afterward, dinner at a nice restaurant, everyone dressed up, clearly a planned celebration. I just hadn't been included in the planning. The third sign was the credit card statement that arrived in April. I always reviewed my statements carefully, a habit from my nursing days when attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. But this month's statement for the card I'd given Chloe made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. $6,847.23 in charges from something called Desert Bloom Floral Design, $3,200 to Phoenix Paradise Catering, $2,100 to Elegant Affairs Event Planning, $1,850 to Sunshine Photography Studio. And that was just the first page. I called Chloe immediately. Honey, I'm looking at the credit card statement, and there are some charges I don't understand. What do you mean? There's almost $7,000 to a florist and thousands more to caterers and photographers. These don't look like emergencies. Chloe's voice got defensive immediately. Mom, the wedding is an emergency. We found our dream venue, but we had to book everything right away or lose the date. Chloe, we agreed the card was for genuine emergencies, medical bills, car repairs, things like that. The wedding is an emergency. The venue only had one date available, and if we didn't book all the vendors immediately, we'd lose everything. I felt my stomach sinking as I flipped through the pages of charges. Florists, caterers, musicians, photographers, venue fees, dress shops, thousands and thousands of dollars. Sweetie, how much did you spend? I don't know exactly. I mean, everything was so last minute, and Aaron's parents said they'd help, but then his dad's business had some issues, so we had to cover more than we planned. I kept adding numbers in my head. Sweetie, this looks like it's going to be over $30,000.
Mom, it's my wedding. This is supposed to be the most important day of my life. I thought you'd be happy I found someone who loves me. The manipulation in that statement, turning my concern about massive unauthorized charges into a question about whether I supported her happiness, was so blatant it took my breath away. Of course I'm happy you found Aaron. But $30,000, Chloe. That's more than half of what your father's life insurance left me. It's just money, Mom, and it's not like you need it sitting in your account doing nothing. Just money. My husband's life insurance, the money that was supposed to ensure I could maintain my independence as I aged, was just money to my daughter? That night, I sat at my kitchen table with every credit card statement from the past 6 months spread out in front of me. The pattern was clear and devastating. Chloe had been using the card not for emergencies, but as her personal wedding fund. The charges started small, a couple $100s here and there for venue deposits and dress fittings, but they'd escalated rapidly as she realized I wasn't monitoring the account closely. The total came to $34,247.92. $34,000 of my retirement savings and Henry's life insurance money spent on a wedding for a daughter who couldn't be bothered to invite me to her engagement dinner. But that wasn't even the worst of what I discovered. The next morning, I decided to review all my financial accounts to get a complete picture of my situation. What I found in my checking account made the credit card charges look like pocket change. There were regular transfers I didn't remember authorizing. $800 here, $1,200 there, always with memo lines like Brandon car payment or Brandon insurance or Brandon utilities. I pulled up 6 months of statements and started adding them up. Brandon had been helping himself to my checking account to the tune of about $2,000 per month. For someone who supposedly didn't have a job, he was spending an awful lot of my money. I walked downstairs to the basement where Brandon had been living rent-free since Henry's death. Brandon, we need to talk. He was lying on the couch I'd bought him, playing video games on the PlayStation I'd also bought him, eating cereal from my kitchen. What's up, Mom? I'm looking at my bank statements and there are a lot of transfers I don't remember authorizing. He didn't even look away from his game. Oh yeah, you said I could use the account for stuff I needed, car payment, insurance, I said you could ask before taking money for necessities. I never said you could help yourself to $2,000 per month.
It's not $2,000 a month, he said, still not looking at me. I had the statements in my hand. Brandon, it's exactly $2,000 a month on average, sometimes more. He finally paused his game and looked at me with annoyance, like I was interrupting something important. Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just basic living expenses. Basic living expenses for what? You don't pay rent, you eat my food, you use my utilities. What exactly are you spending $2,000 a month on? Brandon shrugged. Car stuff, insurance, going out, clothes, whatever. Normal stuff. Normal stuff that costs $2,000 a month while you live here for free? Mom, I'm trying to get my business started. Once that takes off, I'll pay you back everything. I'd been hearing about Brandon's mysterious business for 3 years. It seemed to involve a lot of meetings at coffee shops and networking events that looked suspiciously like parties, but never any actual income. What business, Brandon? What exactly are you doing to earn money? I'm working on a consulting thing, business development. It's complicated. It's been complicated for 3 years. When exactly is this consulting business going to start generating income? Brandon's irritation was turning to anger now. Jesus, Mom, why are you giving me the 3rd degree? You never cared about this stuff before.
I care about it now because I just discovered that your sister has spent $34,000 of my money without permission. And you've been taking $2,000 a month from my checking account. That's not sustainable, Brandon. It's not $34,000, Mom. It's just money you had sitting around anyway. There it was again. Just money. The money Henry had worked 40 years to provide for me was just money they had sitting around. Brandon, that money was supposed to ensure I can take care of myself as I get older. It's my security, my independence. You're being selfish, Mom. Family is supposed to help each other. I stared at my son, lying on my couch, eating my food, playing games on electronics I'd bought him, after taking my money without permission, and he was calling me selfish for objecting? That's when something clicked in my mind. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary situation. This was a pattern of entitlement and exploitation that had been building for years, and it was only going to get worse. My children saw me as a resource to be managed, not a person to be respected. They included me in their lives only when they needed something from me, and they excluded me when my presence might be inconvenient or when they thought I might object to their choices. I was funding a wedding I wasn't invited to help plan, supporting a son who contributed nothing to the household, and being made to feel guilty for expecting basic respect and consideration. As a pediatric nurse, I'd seen this pattern before, not in families, but in my young patients who'd been neglected or exploited by the adults who were supposed to protect them. The victims learned to accept less and less consideration while providing more and more resources until they had nothing left to give. I'd become my own children's victim. But unlike a vulnerable child, I had resources, experience, and the legal right to protect myself. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I didn't confront Brandon further that morning. Instead, I did what I'd learned to do in medical emergencies: gather all the information first, then make a treatment plan based on facts rather than emotions. I spent the next 2 days going through every financial record I had access to: bank statements, credit card statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, tax returns, everything. What I found was worse than I had initially thought. The unauthorized credit card charges weren't just for wedding expenses. There were charges to high-end restaurants in Phoenix that I'd never been to, luxury shopping trips, spa treatments, even a weekend trip to Sedona that Chloe had never mentioned to me. She'd been using the card as her personal entertainment fund for months. Brandon's checking account withdrawals were similarly broad. Car payments for a car he'd crashed 6 months ago and hadn't replaced. Insurance for vehicles he no longer owned. Hundreds of dollars to bars and restaurants. Gaming equipment. Clothes from expensive stores. Even payments to something called Phoenix Investment Opportunities LLC that looks suspiciously like some kind of get-rich-quick scheme. But the most shocking discovery came when I decided to check my credit reports to make sure there weren't any other surprises waiting for me. There was a business line of credit for $60,000 that I'd never applied for, never signed for, and never been notified about. The address was my address. The business name was Reynolds Consulting Solutions, LLC. And according to the credit report, it was already in default. I called the bank immediately. I'm calling about a business line of credit that's showing up on my credit report, but I never applied for this. Can you give me the account number? I read off the number from my credit report. I see the account here. It's for Reynolds Consulting Solutions with your address. The primary signatory is listed as Brandon Reynolds. Are you a co-signer on this account? My blood went cold. No, I am not. I never signed anything for this business line of credit. Ma'am, I'm showing that this account was opened using your address and your credit information as verification of residence and financial stability. If you didn't authorize this, you may want to speak to our fraud department. I was transferred to the fraud department where I learned that Brandon had somehow used my personal information to secure a business loan that I was potentially liable for. The business had received the full $60,000, spent it immediately, and hadn't made a single payment. If the bank came after me for this debt, I could lose my house. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, shaking. My son hadn't just been taking money from my checking account. He'd been using my credit and my address to secure loans he had no intention of repaying, potentially leaving me responsible for his debts.
This wasn't just entitlement or poor money management. This was fraud. I called an attorney that afternoon. Carla Diaz had handled Henry's estate planning, and I trusted her to be direct about my legal situation. When I explained what I'd discovered, she was quiet for a long time. Martha, what your children have done, the unauthorized credit card charges, the checking account withdrawals, and especially the business loan, this could constitute financial elder abuse under Arizona law. Financial elder abuse? Using an older person's financial resources without their consent, or using their identity to secure credit. It's a serious crime, and it's exactly what your son appears to have done with that business loan. I felt sick. Carla, I don't want to send my children to prison. I understand. But Martha, you need to protect yourself first. If that business loan defaults and the bank comes after you, you could lose everything. Your house, your savings, your security. What can I do? Several things. First, we need to freeze all the credit cards and bank accounts they have access to. Second, we need to report the business loan as fraud to protect you from liability. Third, we need to change your will to ensure they can't inherit their way out of the debts they've created. Change my will? Right now, if something happens to you, they inherit everything, and all your assets go toward paying off their debts. We can restructure your will so they only inherit after they've repaid what they owe you, and we can designate a significant portion of your estate to charities so there's less incentive for them to see you as a financial solution to their problems. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad in my hand and started making lists. What they owed, what they'd taken, what I needed to do to protect myself. The numbers were staggering, Between the credit card charges, the checking account withdrawals, and the potential liability for Brandon's fraudulent business loan, my children had put me at risk for over $100,000 in losses. But more than the money, I was devastated by the realization of how they saw me. I wasn't their mother. I was their financial resource. I wasn't someone whose feelings mattered. I was someone whose presence was optional unless they needed something. The engagement dinner I wasn't invited to, the recitals I didn't know about, the constant requests for money paired with decreasing calls just to check on me. The assumption that my money was their money, that my house was their house, that my retirement was their inheritance to spend in advance. I'd raised them to value family, but they'd learned to value only what family could provide for them. As a pediatric nurse, I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their harmful behavior. I'd seen families destroy themselves trying to protect a child who was manipulating and exploiting them, and I'd seen other families save themselves and their children by setting firm boundaries and refusing to be victimized. It was time to stop being a victim and start being the mother my children actually needed, even if they were too old and too entitled to appreciate it. If you're enjoying my strategy for fighting back, hit that subscribe button because you won't believe what I did next. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Carla Diaz's business card in my hand and a plan forming in my mind. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. My first call was to the credit card company. I need to report unauthorized charges on my account and freeze the card immediately. What type of unauthorized charges? My daughter has been using a card I gave her for emergencies to make over $30,000 in wedding expenses without my permission. I see. We can freeze the card immediately and start a dispute process for the charges. Within an hour, Chloe's access to my credit was cut off completely. I knew she'd discover this as soon as she tried to make another vendor payment, but I wasn't ready to deal with that conversation yet. My second call was to my bank. I need to remove Brandon Reynolds from access to my checking account and change all my account numbers. Has there been unauthorized activity on the account? Yes, he's been withdrawing funds without my permission, and I've discovered he may have used my personal information for fraudulent business loans. The bank representative walked me through the process of closing my existing accounts and opening new ones that Brandon couldn't access. They also flagged my credit reports to prevent any new accounts from being opened without additional verification. My third call was back to Carla Diaz. Carla, I want to file fraud reports for the business loan and change my will immediately. Are you sure you're ready for the consequences, Martha? Once you file fraud reports, this becomes a criminal matter. I'm sure. My son used my identity to secure a loan he never intended to repay. That's fraud, regardless of whether he's my son. And changing the will? I want to leave half of my estate to the Pediatric Health Outreach Program at the medical center and half to the Senior Pet Rescue here in Flagstaff. My children can inherit whatever's left only after they've repaid every cent they owe me with interest. That's a significant change, Martha. It's a necessary change. They've made it clear they see me as their inheritance rather than their mother. I'm going to make sure they learn the difference. My fourth call was the most difficult. I called a locksmith and scheduled them to change the locks on my house that afternoon. Then I sat down and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Chloe. Dear Chloe, I have discovered the full extent of the charges you've made on the credit card I gave you for emergencies. $34,247.92 is not an emergency. It's financial abuse. The card has been canceled, and I've filed disputes for all unauthorized charges. If you want my help with your wedding, You can ask for it respectfully and accept whatever I choose to give. You cannot steal it. I love you, but I will not allow you to bankrupt me for your convenience. Mom. The second was to Brandon. Brandon, I've discovered that you've been taking money from my checking account without permission and that you've used my personal information to secure fraudulent business loans. Your access to my accounts has been terminated, and the locks on the house have been changed. You have 24 hours to remove your belongings and find somewhere else to live. I filed fraud reports with the appropriate authorities. If you want to avoid criminal charges, you need to contact attorney Carla Diaz immediately to discuss repayment arrangements. This is not a negotiation. Mom. I left Brandon's letter on the kitchen table and drove to Phoenix to deliver Chloe's in person. When I knocked on Chloe's apartment door, she opened it with a smile that faltered as soon as she saw my face. Mom? What are you doing here? I handed her the letter. Read this. She opened it right there in the doorway, and I watched her face go white. Mom, you can't be serious. The wedding is in 6 weeks. I'm completely serious. You stole from me, Chloe. You used my grief over your father's death and my love for you to steal over $30,000. I didn't steal anything. You gave me the card. I gave you a card for emergencies. Your wedding is not an emergency, and spending my money without asking is theft, regardless of our relationship. Chloe started crying, the same tears that had worked on me for 32 years. Mom, please, I can't cancel everything now. Aaron's family will think I'm a disaster. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to fund your wedding with stolen money. It's not stolen. You're my mother. I shouldn't have to ask permission to use family money for my wedding. And there it was, the core belief that had driven all of this. My money was family money, and she was entitled to use it however she wanted. Chloe, it's not family money. It's my money. Money your father worked 40 years to leave me so I could take care of myself. You are not entitled to it. Mom, you're being selfish and cruel. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life. No, Chloe, I'm being self-protective. There's a difference. I left her crying in her doorway and drove home to Flagstaff. Brandon was waiting for me in the driveway, his girlfriend, Mia, beside him. They both looked furious. Mom, what the hell is this? Brandon held up my letter. You can't just kick me out. I can, and I have. The locks are changed, your access to my accounts is terminated, and you have until tomorrow evening to get your things. This is insane! I'm your son. Yes, you are. And, as my son, you committed fraud against me. You used my identity to secure business loans you never intended to repay. Mia stepped forward, her voice shrill. Mrs. Reynolds, you can't do this. Brandon doesn't have anywhere to go. I looked at Mia, this girl who'd been living in my house for 8 months, eating my food, using my utilities, treating my home like a free hotel, and contributing absolutely nothing. Mia, you're not part of this family, and you're not part of this conversation. You need to find somewhere else to live too. You can't kick me out. I have rights. Actually, you don't. You're not on any lease, you pay no rent, and you have no legal right to be in my house. You're a guest whose welcome has been revoked. Brandon was turning red now. Mom, you're destroying our family. No, Brandon. You destroyed our family when you decided to steal from me. I'm just protecting what's left. I walked past them both and used my new key to enter my own house. Through the window, I could see them arguing in the driveway, probably trying to figure out how to get inside. They couldn't. For the first time in 3 years, my house was actually mine again. That evening, my phone started ringing. First Chloe, crying and begging, then Brandon, angry and threatening, then Mia, trying to guilt me into changing my mind. I didn't answer any of the calls. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my living room, and enjoyed the silence of my own home for the first time since Henry died. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my front door and voices shouting my name. I looked out the window to see Brandon, Mia, and now Chloe and Aaron all standing on my porch. I made myself coffee and toast, taking my time, let them wait. When I finally opened the door, they all started talking at once. "Mom, this is insane! Mrs. Reynolds, you have to listen! You're ruining everything! Can we please just talk about this?" I held up my hand. "Stop!" They all fell silent. "Brandon, did you get a lawyer?" "Mom, I can't afford a lawyer." "Then you'd better figure it out. Because you committed fraud, and I've filed reports with the police and the FBI. Aaron stepped forward. He was a quiet man, an accountant, and I could see he was genuinely confused by what was happening. "Mrs. Reynolds, I think there might be some misunderstanding about the wedding expenses." "What kind of misunderstanding, Aaron?" "Chloe told me you'd agreed to pay for the wedding. She showed me the credit card and said it was wedding money from you." I looked at my daughter, who was staring at her feet. "Is that what you told him, Chloe?" She nodded without looking up.
"Aaron, I never agreed to pay for your wedding. I gave Chloe a credit card for emergencies only. She stole over $30,000 from me without my knowledge or consent." Aaron's face went pale. $30,000? $34,000, to be exact. Aaron turned to look at Chloe. "You told me your mother was paying for everything. You said she insisted on covering the costs because she wanted to do something special for us." Chloe was crying now. "Aaron, please, I can explain." "You lied to me, Chloe. You let me think your mother was being generous when you were actually stealing from her." "It's not stealing. She's my mother." Aaron looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Chloe, stealing from your mother is worse than stealing from a stranger, not better." Brandon tried to redirect the conversation. "Mom, can we focus on the real problem here? You're kicking me out of my home." "It's not your home, Brandon. It's my home. You've been living here rent-free while stealing from my bank accounts and committing fraud in my name." "I wasn't stealing. You said I could use the account for necessities." $2,000 a month is not necessities, Brandon." Mia jumped in. "He needed that money for his business." "What business, Mia? The consulting business that has existed for 3 years but never had a single client? Or the business loan he got using my address and credit information without my permission?" The group fell silent. Aaron spoke first. "There's a business loan?" $60,000 that Brandon obtained using my personal information. It's in default, and the bank was trying to hold me responsible for it." Aaron looked horrified. "Chloe, did you know about any of this?" Chloe shook her head, but I could see she wasn't surprised. "Here's what's going to happen. Aaron, you have until 6 p.m. today to remove your belongings from my house. After that, anything left becomes my property." "Mom, please." "Chloe, the credit card disputes are proceeding. If you want any help with wedding costs, you can ask me respectfully for specific amounts for specific purposes, and I'll decide what I'm comfortable contributing." "The wedding is in 5 weeks." "Then you'd better start making some calls." "Aaron, you need to know that I've changed my will. Instead of inheriting my estate, my children will only receive what's left after they've repaid every dollar they owe me. The majority of my estate now goes to charitable organizations." This got everyone's attention. "You can't do that," Brandon shouted. "I can, and I have. You both made it clear that you see me as your inheritance rather than your mother. I've removed that incentive." Aaron was looking back and forth between me and Chloe like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Mrs. Reynolds, I had no idea about any of this. If I had known Chloe was using your money without permission, what would you have done, Aaron? I would have stopped the wedding planning immediately and insisted she ask for your help properly. I looked at this young man who was showing more integrity in 5 minutes than my children had shown in years. Aaron, you seem like a decent person. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. Mrs. Reynolds, I want to make this right. Whatever Chloe charged to your card, I'll pay back my half. Chloe stared at him. Aaron, we can't afford that.
Then we can't afford this wedding. And just like that, Aaron proved he was nothing like the people who'd raised him to be his wife. The confrontation ended with Brandon and Mia looting his belongings into a friend's truck while cursing me under their breath. Chloe left with Aaron, but not before Aaron shook my hand and promised to be in touch about repayment. That afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Officer Danielle Brooks with the Flagstaff Police Department. I understand you filed a fraud report regarding your son? Yes. Ma'am, I'd like to speak with you in person if possible. Your case may be connected to something larger we're investigating. Officer Brooks came to my house that evening. She was a pleasant woman about my age who specialized in financial crimes against seniors. Mrs. Reynolds, the business loan your son obtained appears to be connected to a larger scheme we've been tracking. There's a group that's been helping people obtain fraudulent business loans using their relatives' information, then disappearing with the money while leaving the family members liable for the debt. My blood ran cold. Are you saying Brandon was working with criminals? We're not sure if he knew he was part of a larger scheme, but the loan application process he went through matches a pattern we've been investigating. These scammers target young adults who are desperate for money and coach them through getting loans using family members' information. What does this mean for Brandon? If he was an unwilling participant who got in over his head, we might be able to work out a cooperation agreement. But if he knew this was part of a scheme to defraud banks and family members, he's looking at serious federal charges. Officer Brooks explained that my cooperation could help them break up the entire ring. They needed details about how Brandon had accessed my personal information, who had coached him through the loan application process, and whether there were other family members who might have been targeted. Mrs. Reynolds, I have to ask, do you want to help us pursue this, even though it means your son could face criminal charges? I thought about that question for a long time. Officer Brooks, my son committed fraud against me. Whether he did it alone or as part of a larger scheme doesn't change that fact. If helping you prevents this from happening to other families, then yes, I want to help. Over the next week, Officer Brooks and I worked together to document everything Brandon had done. The unauthorized bank withdrawals, the business loan application, the people he'd been meeting with who claimed to be helping him start his consulting business. It turned out that Phoenix Investment Opportunities LLC, the company Brandon had been paying hundreds of dollars to, was part of the fraud ring. They'd been coaching him on how to use my information to secure loans, taking a percentage of the money, then disappearing when the loans came due. Brandon had been both a perpetrator and a victim, but that didn't excuse what he'd done to me. The investigation moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, Officer Brooks called to tell me they'd arrested 5 people connected to the scheme and recovered documentation showing dozens of families who'd been victimized. Mrs. Reynolds, your willingness to come forward may have saved other families from losing their homes and retirement savings. But the personal consequences were just beginning. Chloe's wedding planning collapsed almost immediately. Without access to my credit card, she couldn't make vendor payments. When the vendors called demanding money, she tried to tell them I was being difficult about family finances, but Aaron wouldn't let her continue lying. He called me directly. Mrs. Reynolds, I've canceled the wedding. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm not. Chloe lied to me for months about the money, and when I found out the truth, she tried to convince me that stealing from your retirement was acceptable because family money belongs to everyone. That's not the kind of person I can marry. Have you worked out the repayment issue? I've been going through all the charges with Chloe, and I'm taking responsibility for half of everything, even though I didn't know it was unauthorized. I should have asked more questions when she said you were paying for everything. 3 days later, Aaron came to my house with a cashier's check for $17,000, exactly half of the disputed credit card charges.
This is everything I can afford right now, but I'll pay you the rest in monthly installments until it's all covered. I looked at this young man who was taking responsibility for debts he'd never agreed to in order to make amends for lies he'd never told. Aaron, I appreciate this more than you know, but you don't have to pay for Chloe's choices. Yes, I do. I benefited from those choices even though I didn't know they were harming you. That makes me responsible. After Aaron left, I sat in my kitchen with his check in my hand and realized that this stranger had shown me more respect and integrity in one afternoon than my own children had shown me in years. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, credit card disputes, and family drama. Brandon was arrested, charged, and eventually agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would serve 6 months in county jail and be required to pay restitution through wage garnishment for the next 5 years. Chloe, meanwhile, seemed to have learned nothing from the experience. She called me daily, alternating between anger and manipulation. "Mom, Aaron left me because of what you did. Aaron left you because you lied to him and stole from me. You destroyed my wedding. You destroyed my relationship. And now everyone knows what happened because Aaron told his family everything. Chloe, you destroyed your own wedding when you decided to fund it with stolen money. It wasn't stolen. You never even cared about money before Dad died." That comment revealed something I hadn't realized. Chloe genuinely believed that my money had become family money when Henry died, and that I was being selfish by wanting to keep it. Chloe, when your father was alive, we made financial decisions together. Now that he's gone, I make them alone. That's how it works. But what about family? What about helping each other? Family help goes both ways, Chloe. You take and take and take, but when have you ever helped me? She was quiet for a moment. I check on you. When? When you call asking for money? When you text asking for favors? I visited you after Dad's funeral. You visited me because you needed emotional support. When was the last time you visited just to spend time with me? She couldn't answer that question. What did you think of my approach so far? Was I being too harsh, or was this exactly what my children needed? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more stories of people reclaiming their lives from financial abuse, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. But the most surprising development came from my neighbor Frances Cole, a widow about my age, who I'd never really gotten to know well. The day after Brandon was arrested, she showed up to my door with a casserole and a bottle of wine. "I heard you've been having some family troubles," she said. "I thought you might not feel like cooking." We sat at my kitchen table, and Frances listened while I told her the whole story. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Martha, I went through something similar with my son 5 years ago. Not fraud, but financial manipulation and emotional abuse. It nearly destroyed me." "What did you do?" "What you're doing. I set boundaries, cut off access to my money, and made it clear that love doesn't mean being a victim." "Did he ever change?" Frances smiled sadly. "He changed after he realized I wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. It took 2 years of him struggling on his own, but he eventually got his life together and apologized genuinely. Now we have a real relationship instead of a transaction." "Do you regret setting the boundaries?" "Never. The hardest part was accepting that the children I raised weren't the adults they became, and that enabling their bad behavior wasn't helping them or me." Frances became my closest friend during those difficult months. She helped me understand that what I was feeling wasn't anger. It was grief.
I was grieving the loss of the relationship I thought I had with my children and the loss of the people I thought they were. But I was also discovering who I actually was when I wasn't being used and manipulated. For the first time in years, I had time to think about what I wanted to do with my life. I started volunteering at the free pediatric clinic at the medical center, using my nursing skills to help families who couldn't afford health care. I adopted a senior dog from the rescue, a gentle old golden retriever named Charlie, who'd been surrendered when his owner couldn't afford his medical bills. I rediscovered friendships I'd let lapse when all my time and energy were going to my children's crises. I took a pottery class, joined a hiking group, and started reading books again instead of spending my evenings worrying about Chloe's latest drama or Brandon's latest scheme. I was becoming myself again instead of just being someone's mother, someone's financial resource, someone's solution to problems they'd created. The credit card disputes were settled in my favor after 3 months. The bank ruled that the charges were clearly unauthorized and fraudulent, and I recovered the full $34,000. Combined with Aaron's voluntary repayment, I was actually ahead financially for the first time in years. More importantly, I was free. 6 months after I changed the locks on my house, Officer Brooks called with news that made all the struggle worthwhile. Mrs. Reynolds, I wanted to let you know that the investigation you helped us with has been incredibly successful. We've broken up the entire fraud ring, recovered over $2 million in stolen money, and prevented an estimated 50 families from being victimized. That's wonderful. There's something else. The district attorney wants to recognize your courage at next month's town hall on elder abuse. Your willingness to stand up to family members who were exploiting you has become a model case for our prevention programs. I agreed to speak at the town hall, though I was nervous about sharing such personal details publicly. But when the night came, I found myself energized by the opportunity to help other families avoid what I had gone through. 6 months ago, I told the audience, I thought I was being a good mother by giving my children unlimited access to my money and my home. I thought family meant never saying no, never setting boundaries, never protecting myself from their bad choices. I learned that's not love, that's enabling, and enabling hurts everyone involved. After my presentation, 3 different families approached me to say they recognized similar patterns in their own lives and wanted help setting boundaries with adult children who were financially exploiting them. Officer Brooks introduced me to a social worker who specialized in family financial abuse, and together we started an informal support group for parents and grandparents who were being exploited by their own families. It was heartbreaking how common the problem was. Adult children who moved back home and never left. Grandchildren whose parents used them to manipulate grandparents into providing money. Family members who saw elderly relatives as inheritance sources rather than people deserving respect. But it was also inspiring to watch people reclaim their lives and their dignity. The changes in my own family were mixed but significant. Brandon served his 6 months in county jail and emerged genuinely humbled. The cooperation agreement he'd made with prosecutors required him to speak at schools about financial fraud schemes, and he told me later that talking to young people about how he'd been manipulated helped him understand how he'd manipulated me. He got a job as a maintenance worker at a hotel in Tucson, and true to the legal agreement, his wages were garnished to pay restitution. But for the first time in years, he was supporting himself. Mom, I know I can't undo what I did,
but I want you to know I finally understand how badly I hurt you. What do you understand, Brandon? I understand that you worked your whole life to build security for yourself, and I was stealing that security while telling myself I deserved it because I was your son. And and I understand that being your son should have made me want to protect you, not exploit you.
She moved back to Flagstaff and rented a small apartment, working full-time in administrative jobs for the first time in years. She called me regularly, but the tone of our conversations gradually changed from demands and manipulation to actual interest in my life. "Mom, I heard you spoke at the town hall about elder abuse. How did it go?" "It went well. It felt good to help other families." "I'm proud of you." "Thank you, Chloe." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think you'll ever trust me again?" I thought about that question for a long time. Chloe, trust isn't something you give or receive. It's something you build through consistent actions over time. Are you willing to let me build it? I'm willing to see what you choose to build. The most rewarding relationship development was completely unexpected. Aaron continued to make monthly payments toward the wedding debt even after he and Chloe broke up. Every month, he'd send a check with a note updating me on his life. He'd started dating someone new, a teacher who worked with special needs children. He'd gotten a promotion at his accounting firm. He was taking classes toward becoming a CPA. One day, he called and asked if he could take me to lunch. "Aaron, you don't owe me anything beyond the money, and you've been more than fair about that." "This isn't about debt, Mrs. Reynolds. I'd like to get to know you better." Over lunch, Aaron told me something that surprised me. "Mrs. Reynolds, watching you stand up for yourself taught me something important about relationships." "What's that?" "I learned that someone who truly loves you won't try to exploit you or manipulate you. They won't make you feel guilty for protecting yourself." That's a wise lesson. I realized that if Chloe had been the right person for me, she would have been horrified when she found out she was spending your money without permission. Instead, she was angry at you for objecting. Aaron had learned in 6 months what it took me years to understand. Love doesn't require you to be a victim. A year after I changed those locks, my life looked completely different. I was physically healthier because I wasn't constantly stressed about my children's crises. I was financially secure because no one was draining my accounts. I was emotionally stronger because I'd learned to distinguish between love and exploitation. Charlie the dog and I took long walks every morning through neighborhoods I'd never explored when I was too busy managing other people's problems. I'd made new friends through volunteering and the support group. I was taking Spanish classes because I wanted to travel to Mexico, something Henry and I had always talked about but never done. Most surprisingly, my relationships with Chloe and Brandon were actually improving, not because they'd become perfect people, but because we were interacting as adults rather than as a victim and her exploiters. Chloe had started asking before she borrowed small amounts of money, and she always paid them back on schedule. Brandon called regularly just to check on me without asking for anything. They both treated me with the level of respect I hadn't seen from them since they were children. "Mom," Chloe said during one of our weekly phone calls, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I was angry at you for a long time for cutting off my access to your money." "I know you were. But now I understand that you weren't punishing me. You were teaching me to be an adult." "How so?" "When I had unlimited access to your credit card, I never had to think about whether I could afford things or whether they were really important. I just bought whatever I wanted and figured you'd deal with the consequences."
And now? Now I have to think about every purchase. I have to budget. I have to choose between things I want because I can't have everything. And you know what? What? I'm actually happier. I appreciate things more when I have to work for them. That conversation made all the difficult months worthwhile. Francis and I often talked about the unexpected gifts that came from setting boundaries with our children. I thought I was protecting them by solving all their problems, Francis told me, but I was actually preventing them from learning how to solve problems themselves. I thought I was showing love by giving them whatever they wanted, I agreed, but I was actually teaching them that love meant exploitation. The hardest part was accepting that being a good mother doesn't mean being a victim. The best part is discovering that they're capable of more than we gave them credit for. Both our sons had surprised us by rising to meet higher expectations once we stopped enabling their irresponsibility. But the most important discovery was about myself. For years after Henry died, I'd felt like half of a person, like my identity was incomplete without him. I'd let my children fill that void by making me indispensable to their dysfunction. Reclaiming my independence forced me to rediscover who I was as an individual, not just as a wife or mother. I was Martha Reynolds, a skilled nurse who'd spent her career protecting vulnerable patients. I was a woman with interests and goals and dreams that had nothing to do with other people's problems. I was someone worthy of respect, not because of what I could provide for others, but because of who I was as a person. When Brandon asked me during one of our calls how he could prove he'd changed, I gave him the same answer I gave myself every day. Real change isn't performed, Brandon. It's lived. You don't prove change through grand gestures or promises. You prove it through consistent daily choices to be better than you were yesterday. How will I know if I'm succeeding? You'll know because you'll start making choices based on what's right rather than what's easy. You'll consider how your actions affect other people. You'll take responsibility for your mistakes instead of blaming others for the consequences. Are you proud of me for trying? I thought about that question. I'm proud of you for starting, Brandon, but being proud of you for trying is different from trusting you because you're succeeding. Trust comes after consistent success, not after good intentions. It was a lesson I was still learning myself, the difference between hope and trust, between love and enabling, between being supportive and being a victim. 18 months after that horrible day when I discovered the credit card charges, I received a call that brought everything full circle. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Detective Martinez with the Phoenix Police Department. Officer Brooks and Flagstaff gave me your contact information. How can I help you? We've arrested someone in connection with a financial exploitation case, and we found evidence that your daughter might have been involved in fraudulent activity. My heart sank. What kind of evidence? Credit card fraud? The suspect had personal information for several families, including yours. When we asked how he got your information, he said your daughter had provided it in exchange for help with wedding expenses. I closed my eyes. Even after everything we'd been through, Chloe had still been looking for easy money. Detective, what do you need from me?
Mom, please. I was just trying to get money for the wedding. I didn't know they were hurting other people. Chloe, you gave my personal information to strangers in exchange for money. How did you think they were going to get that money? I thought it was some kind of investment thing. Even facing criminal charges, she was still lying to me. Chloe, stop. Just stop lying. She broke down completely then. Mom, I was so angry when you canceled the credit card, I felt like you'd ruined my life. When these people said they could help me get money for the wedding without involving you, I thought it was perfect. And it didn't occur to you to wonder where that money would come from? I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted my wedding. My daughter had been willing to help criminals steal from elderly victims because she wanted a wedding she couldn't afford. This wasn't immaturity or poor judgment. This was a fundamental lack of empathy and moral reasoning. I testified against her. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because what she'd done was wrong and because the victims of the scam ring deserved justice more than my daughter deserved protection from the consequences of her choices. Chloe pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud. She served 8 months in county jail and was ordered to pay restitution to the victims she'd helped target. When she was released, she called me from a halfway house in Phoenix. "Mom, I know you'll probably never forgive me." "Chloe, forgiveness isn't the issue. The issue is whether you understand what you did and why it was wrong. I helped criminals steal from old people because I wanted money for a wedding. And that makes me a criminal too." "Yes, it does." "Mom, I don't know how to come back from this." For the first time in our conversation, I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Genuine remorse instead of self-pity. "Chloe, you come back from it by living differently. Not by asking for forgiveness, but by becoming someone who deserves it. Will you help me? I'll support you if you're genuinely changing, but I won't enable you if you're just looking for another safety net. How will you know the difference? You'll show me through your actions over time, not through promises or apologies, but through consistent choices to be better." People often ask me if I regret how I handled my children's financial abuse. They want to know if I think I was too harsh, if I should have been more forgiving, if I damaged our family relationships permanently. My answer is always the same. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret what I did. For years, I confused love with enabling. I thought being a good mother meant protecting my children from the consequences of their bad choices. I thought family loyalty meant giving unlimited second chances and unlimited financial support. What I learned is that real love sometimes requires you to let people fail. Real family loyalty sometimes means protecting yourself from family members who are hurting you. And being a good parent sometimes means refusing to be a victim. My children taught me that entitlement is learned, not inherited. They learned to see me as a resource instead of a person because I taught them that's what I was. Every time I paid their bills without requiring accountability, every time I accepted disrespect to avoid conflict, every time I prioritized their comfort over my own security, I was teaching them that my value was in what I could provide, not in who I was. Changing that dynamic required me to stop being who they needed me to be and start being who I needed me to be.
The most important lesson I learned is that you cannot love someone into respecting you. Respect is earned through boundaries, not given through generosity. When you allow people to treat you badly, you're not teaching them about unconditional love. You're teaching them about conditional dignity. Today, my relationships with my children are healthier than they've been in years. Not because we pretend the abuse never happened, but because we've built new relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Brandon has been steadily employed for 2 years now, making his restitution payments and building a life based on his own efforts rather than my resources. We talk regularly, and for the first time since he was a teenager, I enjoy our conversations because they're not centered on his latest crisis or request for money. Chloe completed her sentence and started working as a counselor for people struggling with addiction and financial problems. She says helping others who've made similar mistakes helps her understand the impact of her own choices. She pays me back $50 every month, not because she legally has to anymore, but because she wants to repair the damage she caused. More importantly, she asks about my life, remembers details from our conversations, and treats me like someone whose feelings and opinions matter. She's becoming the person I always hoped she could be, not through my enabling, but through her own hard work to rebuild her character.
Aaron and I have maintained our friendship. He married his teacher girlfriend last year and invited me to the wedding. Watching him marry someone who genuinely loved and respected him, who would never have dreamed of stealing from her future mother-in-law, reminded me that healthy relationships are possible when both people choose integrity over convenience. At 61, my life is fuller and happier than it's been since Henry died. Not because my problems are solved, but because my problems are actually mine to solve. I'm not managing other people's crises, enabling other people's irresponsibility, or funding other people's dreams at the expense of my own security. I volunteer at the pediatric clinic because I want to, not because I'm trying to fill a void left by dysfunctional relationships. I travel because I enjoy exploring new places, not because I'm running away from family drama. I've made friends based on shared interests and mutual respect, not on what I can provide for them. Charlie and I have settled into a routine that brings me joy every day. Morning walks, afternoon volunteering, evenings reading or visiting with Francis or other friends I've made through the support group. I'm not waiting for my children to call with their latest crisis. I'm not checking my bank accounts for unauthorized withdrawals. I'm not walking on eggshells to avoid triggering someone else's anger or disappointment. I'm just living my life, making my own choices, and enjoying the peace that comes from refusing to be anyone's victim, even when that someone is your own child. The real victory wasn't getting my money back or seeing my children face consequences for their actions. The real victory was rediscovering that I am a whole person with or without them, that my worth isn't determined by my usefulness to others, and that love doesn't require me to sacrifice my dignity or security. To other parents who are being financially or emotionally exploited by their adult children, you are not responsible for solving your children's problems at the expense of your own well-being. You are not obligated to bankrupt yourself financially or emotionally to prove your love. You are allowed to have boundaries, to protect your resources, and to expect basic respect in return for your generosity. Setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a person who understands that healthy relationships require mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. And to my children, if you're listening, I love you both more than you'll ever know. But I love myself enough now to refuse to be destroyed by that love. The greatest gift I can give you is the example of a person who knows her own worth, not because someone else validates it, but because she's learned to validate it herself. That's a lesson that's taken me 61 years to learn, but it's never too late to start living with dignity.